Good morning, everyone. My name is Joel Anderson. I'm a director with RSM and a contractor for the Department of Management Division of IT. Today we are discussing NOFA 8, the Capital Projects Fund, NOFA, and the grant agreement that's here. This is going to be a high-level overview of the grant agreement. But it is also being recorded, and these slide decks will be posted for you to be able to review. Next slide. This is the legal disclaimer that we have. We usually have it at the end of the slide deck. We are also going to have it at the beginning of the slide deck. Please note that everything that we discuss today is not legal advice given by the department or RSM. Please consult with your legal counsel in reviewing of the grant agreement and any of the applicable attachments before you move forward. So important updates as well. The updated Exhibit E grant agreement has been posted to the NOFA 8 website. Please note that the following changes to the grant agreement has occurred since the grant opportunity closed. The ownership and federal interest period for Attachment B, Section 3. Audits of federally funded contracts and the audit of the non-federal entity, so that would be the grantee, Attachment B, Section 6, and that the Office of the Chief Information Officer as party to the agreement is now replaced with the Department of Management in the Division of IT Services. So I know that a lot of you have been waiting for that, and just due to the changeover in the nature of the realignment that has happened, that has slowed that down. So because of that too, please note that the website date of 11/22 tomorrow for grant execution is no longer going to be enforced. The agency will seek a new due date that allows for sufficient review of the grant agreement materials, including the risk assessment that we will talk about later and when the materials are sent out. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us at grantsupport@iowa.gov. And then once you have the grant agreement signed, an Iowa Grants account will be created for your grant agreement, and then we do ask all correspondents to go through there. So the agenda today, we'll do a quick grant recap, then we'll talk about the grant agreement terms. Once again, this is high level. Please consult your legal counsel. Payment and timing procedures, project completion certification, capital project fund requirements, and grant program requirements and certifications, and then next step. So quick grant background. NOFA 8 funds are allocated from the American Rescue Plan Act, the Capital Projects Fund. That is different than NOFA 7 that came from the American Rescue Plan Act, state and local fiscal recovery funds. So do know that we are dealing with a different aspect and a different section of the American Rescue Plan. The state of Iowa is the recipients of the Capital Projects Fund, particularly the Office of the Department of Management, and then the grantee, you would be the subrecipients of the Capital Projects Fund. The performance period is March 15th of 2021 through September 30th of 2026, and only costs associated with the projects incurred, paid, and invoiced to the office during the Capital Projects Fund performance period, or that were incurred prior to the grantee's receipt of this award, but subsequently used in the project may be considered as allowable expenditures under this grant. Please note that the Capital Projects Fund does not have an obligation date. That is a big key difference between NOFA 7 that has the 2024 obligation date under state and local fiscal recovery funds. Capital Project does not have that obligation date. So you would be able to obligate up to September 30th of 26, but obviously we would also need to have the project completed by then. Next slide. So grant agreement terms and sorry, I'm going to be reading a lot of this directly from the slide so that you guys can both hear it verbally and also read it too, but I will also explain it. By executing this agreement and accepting this Capital Projects Fund funded award made available under the American Recovery Plan Act and this NOFA, grantee acknowledges that it shall be deemed a subrecipient as defined by applicable laws and receiving a fixed amount subaward. Applicable laws section 2.1 is any and all applicable federal, state, foreign, and local laws, rules, regulations, codes, ordinances, policies, orders, or any other legal requirement or limitation, and specifically including CPF requirements in place as execution of this agreement, as well as any and all future amendments, changes, or additions to such laws as the effective date of such change. Basically, American Rescue Plan Act lays out everything that we have to deal with. Capital Projects Fund guidance then lets us know the next round of requirements that we have to follow, but then also local ordinances still apply. Local policy, state policy still applies if it is allowed or not allowed. So please know that all of those are there. It shouldn't be any different than what you're dealing with day in and day out. You're still going to have to get permitting. You're still going to have to do all that. This is just saying that all of those are still taken into account, and also that Treasury might add additional requirements or more likely reduce burdens, as we did see in the Treasury guidance that came out last year or earlier this year that allowed for that fixed amount subaward to ease procurement issues. Similar stuff that was happening in NOFA 7. If you have a NOFA 7 grant, we have updated that into this project as well. Next slide. So payment timing and procedures. There is an advance payment this time as well. Please note that it has changed a bit since NOFA 7, but up to 50% of the awarded funds may be distributed to the grantee upon request and subject to written approval and at the sole discretion of the agency. Any advance payments are contingent on the following four. The grantee successfully passes a risk assessment, which we will talk about later. The expense being included is in the budgeted plan, so make sure that you can tie it back to your budget, particularly in Iowa grants. The expense being timed to be in accordance with the actual immediate cash requirements for implementing the project, meaning that we need to see that you are under contract with this and that you're going to be able to expend that money in a reasonable time, most likely 90 days. We cannot allow for cash to be deployed and then sitting there for a year at a time. And the grantee initiating the construction phase. So you have to be able to show us too that you are going to be starting construction and breaking ground. So we will ask for a bit more detail this time around in advance payment than we did for NOFA 7. Reimbursement. Otherwise, the agency may limit advance payments in accordance with Iowa State Accounting Enterprise Policy. The remaining of the award funds shall be reimbursed in arrears, so upon reimbursement upon project completion, consistent with the terms and conditions of the grant agreement. Expenditures shall be made until after the project is complete, as defined and described in Section 3 of your project completion section, and the agency receives a summary of all final claimed allowable expenditures and other sufficient or appropriate documentation required by the agency to support such claimed allowable expenditures. So this is where we would need your invoices and we would need the proof of payment that's similar to NOFA 7 for those that have started that. But then any additional documentation that we would require to prove that that was an allowable expenditure, most likely seeing that it was for NOFA 8 grant and not for either your own private spend build out outside of the grant of the bank, or that it is tied to another grant. So we do reserve the right to request additional documentation. Next slide. So the project completion certification, the grantee must certify to the agency that the project was completed as proposed or represented in the application, including but not limited to a certification that the final installation facilitates broadband services that reliably meets or exceeds 100 symmetrical broadband, or in cases where 100 symmetrical was not practical because of geography or topography of the area that serves the project, or because the excessive cost of the project provides certification that the project reliably meets or exceeds 100 to 20 broadband, including such justification upon which grantee relied to determine 100 symmetrical was not feasible, and provide certification that the project will be scalable to 100 symmetrical within 3 years of the completion date. So that is one that we will be testing too if you are not able to show 100 symmetrical right at the end of your project. Then the project fully complies with and satisfies any and all terms and conditions identified in the agreement, the NOFA, and all applicable federal, state, foreign, and laws. Basically that you followed all of the required laws that I mentioned earlier. For project completion confirmation, and for the purpose of this agreement, a project shall be considered complete as of the later of the date the agency does the following: accepts the certification and proof of the project completion provided by the grantee as required by the section, so what I just listed above, and verifies that the project certified as complete complies with the requirements of the agreement, NOFA, and the applicable laws pursuant to and in accordance with the performance testing obligation of this section, or otherwise the agency affirmatively elects to verify that the project is complete without exercising its rights to the performance test or conduct any other monitoring, review, or audits rights available to the agency under this agreement. Performance testing potentially can or does not have to be done by the agency. It is up to the agency to decide which one and which projects are going to be performance tests and the manner of those performance tests. And then that confirms that the grantee participates in the Affordable Connectivity Program, so the ACP. So the 3 things we will have to do is get your certification. The agency will have to decide if they're going to do a performance test or rely exclusively on your certification, and verify that you are participating in the Affordable Connectivity Program. Next slide. So the grant requirements, once again, it is the ARPA Act is going to be the governing law, and then all capital projects fund guidance, including any updated or changes there too. This is known as Treasury guidance. Once again, this would be an example of what Treasury put out recently for the broadband specifics, that it was for both SLRF and Capital Projects Fund. And then applicable provisions of the Federal Uniform Guidance, also known as 2 CFR Part 200, applicable to the subrecipient receiving a fixed amount subaward. Pursuant to sub-regulatory guidance published by the U.S. Treasury on May 17th of 23, the grantee is not required to comply with the cost principles and procurement practices of the Uniform Guidance. So this is where we go back to, we are no longer going to be testing of how you procured or went out to bid or solicited quotes or estimates, nor are we going to be testing that cost principle, particularly the one of when it was placed into inventory. So if you had fiber that you've had in inventory prior to March 15th of 2021, as long as you can show that that fiber is being used in your NOFA 8, that would be allowable. And then any other specific grant award requirements set forth in any grant agreement or other similar document between the state of Iowa, the federal government, governing the use of ARPA Act funds, or applicable to projects receiving Act funds. So this is basically going to be your quarterly status reports. As Treasury asks additional information and requests from the state of Iowa, we will pass that along to you. Please note that anytime we are asking a question, it is most likely because Treasury is requiring new information. For those that have participated in NOFA 7, you will know that that was a big list that changed was when we went from HSBs to community anchor institutions, and the new information of how Treasury wanted us to report locations. That would be a similar change that would happen in Capital Projects Fund if Treasury required something new. You would get advance warning of that, and you would be told why that was changing. Next slide. So the grant program requirements, there is progress monitoring and reviews. Please note that your project progress monitoring throughout the period of performance. This will be done by Maggie and myself and our team. This may be through site visits, reports, or other means deemed necessary by the agency. It would be very similar to what was done on NOFA 7 if you have participated in NOFA 7. Cost reviews of reimbursement testing. Please know that that will be invoices and proof of payments. No procurement documentations will be required, which includes contracts and purchase orders, unless we need to see it to make sure that it is for NOFA 8. So we would need to make sure that if you're Contract is for both NOFA 8 and another awarded area or another funded project that we would be able to see how you break that apart in your contract. But it is not a requirement to be submitted with every reimbursement. The Affordable Connectivity Program, grantee must participate in the ACP and offer customers in their completed project area assistance with enrollment. So we will be asking you to show us how you are complying with that. Most likely it's your marketing materials or your website showing us how you are assisting with enrollment. That most likely will be a question on your quarterly status report and that we will follow up on. Ownership and federal interest. Once again, this is new to that grant agreement that I mentioned at the top of the hour. Federal government interest in the Capital Project Fund infrastructure pursuant to this agreement will last until December 31st, 2034. Ownership of the infrastructure must be monitored in accordance with the federal rule. Annual reviews of financial statements. Reviews of the financial statements must be reviewed yearly. So we will be collecting your audited financial statements. If you are a nonprofit or municipality owned ISP, we will be collecting most likely your single audit as well. If you do not have audited financial statements, we do have extra monitoring and test steps in place for those as well. And then payment reviews. Grantees' payments may be delayed or rejected if a grantee has not made substantial progress that correlates with the funding received to date. So that is, if you have received an advance payment, but you have not been able to spend that in a timely manner, we might delay your second payment as we see fit to allow for you to catch up and give us additional documentation. Next slide. UEI and SAM.gov, majority of you already have, I believe you actually did put it into your application, so you should have a registered and active UEI through the SAM system. Note that it does have to stay active during the duration of the grant period. So please make sure that you are doing that. We will remind you about 2 months to a month out of your expiration, since you do have to renew it yearly. Also, please note that SAM.gov is a free service and that there is no cost to renew your registration. I have seen a lot of scams going around lately of businesses that are telling people that it does cost money to renew and then collecting a fee. That is not the case. However, there are also services out there that can monitor your SAM.gov for you and do that on your behalf, but it is a free service, so it should never cost you anything. Next slide. So this is your required certifications. Please, once again, go through this with your legal counsel. I will hit the kind of big ones that we will be looking at. Prohibition on certain telecommunication and video surveillance equipment. Please know that the embargo for any Chinese-based manufactured item, such as Huawei, is still in effect, and that we will still make sure that that is not an allowable expense. And if it is in your network, please let us know ASAP on that. Domestic preference for procurements. Grantees should, to the greatest extent practical, provide a preference for the purchase, acquisition, or use of goods, products, or materials produced in the United States. This potentially is going to be our only question that we have for you regarding procurement. It's just how are you or your vendors doing domestic preference? We also know, though, there is a huge backlog on fiber, for example, and that the United States is currently not producing enough fiber to source all that. So you have a good justification a lot of times of why you did not buy American. We would just need a narrative for that. We are still working out that test step of how we collect that information. Most likely it's going to be through a quarterly status report. And then Davis-Bacon, as amended under that section of the code, the difference between state and local fiscal recovery funds that had you had to have a project and awarded amount greater than 10 million. Capital Projects Fund is at 5 million. So if you are receiving more than $5 million of a grant agreement, once it is actually signed, I do know that negotiations still have to go through. That $5 million will require you to have a Davis-Bacon certification or a fair labor standards practice. We will work with those of you that do arise to that level and have extra test steps that we will walk you through at the beginning of your grant agreement and what we would need to collect. If you are under $5 million, you are not subject to that. The rest of it are normal standard federal funds. If you've ever received other federal operating things such as Drug-Free Workplace, American Disability Act, Naturalization Services, and FFATA reporting, which a lot of that is also in your SAM.gov registration. Next slide. So your next steps is risk assessment will be sent out to you all soon after you've received your grant agreement from the agency. This is a quick screenshot of what it will look like, but please know that it is conditionally formatted. So when you put information in, if you do select yes or no, the questions will change. Also note that there is a place at the bottom to submit your financial documents or any other documents, but it is always at the bottom. So we do suggest that if you select that yes, you have 3 years of audited financial statements, that you would go down, load those up, and then come back, scroll back up to where you were at, and continue this. Also, please note that you can check the send me a copy of my response and then put your email in, and it will send that to you as well. You will only fill this out once, since it is a risk assessment on you as an entity, not your project, but you will still tag all of your projects there on the risk assessment to your control numbers. Next slide. So the previous audited financial statement audits and monitoring. Has the organization been subject to an audit of its financial statement in the past 3 years? If you answer yes to this on your risk assessment, please provide the financial statements with your auditor's opinion. If the management letter comments were also issued, provide the management letters and or describe the current status or observation findings, including therein. We are basically testing your internal controls and seeing your risk at that level. So if management has made any comments on that, in particular your last year that you are currently implementing, please let us know. If no, provide your last year's. So if you have not had audited financial statements, please provide your last year's unaudited financial statements, including a statement of cash flow. That will help us in determining our risk assessments and then our testing and work plan that we would have for your entity. Has the organization been subject to audits or monitoring by any agencies, departments, or divisions of the federal government in the past 3 years? If the answer is yes, provide the following information. The name of the federal agency, department, or division. Do not include previous OCIO NOFA. So NOFA 7, if OCIO has been doing a subrecipient monitoring on you through RSM, that does not count in this thing. We are wanting to know if USDA, NTIA, FCC, Department of Commerce, or any other organization, if you've been working with them, if they have put you through any audits or monitoring, let us know. General description of how the funds were used and summary or report or findings or observations identified by the federal monitor or auditors. If you have not had any audits or monitoring by a federal agency, then you can do no, and then conditional formatting, it would take away all the rest of the questions related to that, so there would be no actions needed. And then for those of you that are nonprofits or municipal-owned ISPs, the single audit, we would need you to upload that documentation as well. If you have not expended the $750,000 and so therefore you didn't have a single audit within the last 3 years, no action is needed. If you are a for-profit entity, you can say no action needed because single audits do not apply to for-profit entities. So next steps, prior to submitting your grant agreement, you'll have to complete and submit the risk assessment that will be sent to you with all applicable attachments, and these may include latest audited financial statements with your auditor's opinion, or last year's unaudited financial statements, including a statement of cash flow, your management letter from audited financial statements, a summary or reports or finding of observations identified by federal monitors or auditors, such as the Office of Inspector General for the relative federal agency, or maybe GAO, the Government Accountability Office, and then management letter from the single audit if applicable. Review the awarded project area and corresponding map, as that will be sent to you from the agency. So please be on the lookout for that here relatively soon. Note that this is especially important for partial awardees, as their proposed award areas will not be proposed. So please, for the partial awardee areas, really please make sure that you're looking at the map to make sure that you are seeing which areas were and were not included in your award. And then review, sign, and return the grant agreement. One last pitch, please make sure that you're consulting with your legal counsel so that you are reviewing all that before you are sending it. And if you have any questions, please contact us at grantsupport@iowa.gov. So once again, pitch RSM did not give legal advice during this, and the agency did not give legal advice. If you have any questions, please send it to Grant Support. This has been recorded and will be put up onto the website, as well as the slide deck. But your grant agreement, if you want a copy of the grant agreement, most currently updated, it is out on the NOFA 8 website. And the agency, I know, is working very hard to get the grant agreement and packets ready to send out to all of you, but it will most likely be after the holiday. With that, thank you, everyone, and I hope you all have a happy Thanksgiving.